Well, first of all, I want to thank all of the folks who are speaking out on this call. I know your personal experiences are so important for all of us to hear, but I know you're doing this under personal duress too. You've all felt the impacts of what's been happening, and for you to get on this call and share it with everybody means the world to me and is so important. So personally, thank you to each one of you. And to all the press, thank you so much for joining me to talk about something that people actually rely on every single day. They take it for granted, and they may not even know the name of it. That's NOAA, NOAA, NOAA. NOAA actually does work that is crucial to our safety, to our economy, and to our everyday lives. People all across the state of Washington count on the National Weather Service, which is at NOAA. When you watch the weather forecast on the news and decide whether it's a great week for hiking, or you check the weather app on your phone and grab your umbrella in Seattle, you're relying on NOAA. Farmers in Yakima Valley rely on NOAA for seasonal outlooks for crop advice, which means our groceries actually rely on it too. When pilots take off from SeaTac Airport or boats head out from our ports, they are consulting NOAA data to prepare for a safe journey. When there is a dangerous storm coming, a blizzard or flooding or tsunami or high winds, local officials and disaster experts use NOAA's data to help issue their public safety guidance, to protect property, and most importantly, to save lives. NOAA is also tracking data that is critical to understanding climate change and showing us how serious that threat is. When we warn that 2024 was the hottest year on record, it's NOAA that tracked that data so you can know that and people can raise the alarm. NOAA scientists also play a crucial role protecting our waters, our oceans, and our fisheries. The Puget Sound, the Columbia River, they all rely on NOAA. In Washington State, salmon are not just a pillar of our economy and of the seafood industry that's so prominent in our state. It's also a way of life for our communities, for our tribes, and it's part of our state identity. So NOAA's work could not be more important when it comes to that. I think we all know that we can take the weather for granted. We can take our fish and water for granted. But this work is make or break, not just for Washington State, but for our entire country. So it is beyond alarming to me that right now, Donald Trump and Elon Musk are choosing break and taking a wrecking ball to NOAA offices. They are firing public servants, they're firing our experts, they're closing buildings like in Port Angeles, and they're throwing a lot of critical work into jeopardy. About half of the National Weather Service offices were already understaffed. And then came this hiring freeze. And then came the massive firings, and that was just round one. Musk and Trump have already fired 650 NOAA workers, including dozens of people right here in Washington State, with no rhyme or reason, with no clue or concern how it will seriously harm our economy and our communities. And now we are hearing that NOAA intends to lay off another 10% of its workforce. That is more than 1,000 critical jobs Trump and Elon are putting on the chopping block. Meanwhile, the problems this has already caused are mounting. NOAA has already had to stop releasing weather balloons due to some staff shortages. Here in Washington State, I have heard from NOAA employees who work to support tribal fish and infrastructure projects. Another was an engineering technician who worked to make sure that our radar locations and our forecast offices could produce the data that we all need. Others were fired that worked to educate the public about our coast at the Olympic Coast National Marine Sanctuary in Port Angeles, gone. A NOAA Employee of the Year, someone who helped divert orcas from an oil spill off of San Juan Island a few years ago, was fired as a result of the fact that she had been promoted last year. And that is just the tip of the iceberg Trump and Musk are steering us into. As you will hear from the people on this call who did really important work for our country, only to have the rug pulled out from under them by a couple of billionaires without a clue. So I want to again say personally thank you to each one of you. I'm really grateful to your years of public service, what you have done for all of us. And I so appreciate you coming here today. I know you're all dealing with personal things as well as a result of being laid off, but I appreciate you coming here today to send one more forecast. And that is a forecast that warns of very dark clouds coming if Trump and Musk do not reverse this course and reverse the unthinkable damage they are doing to NOAA. So again, thank you to each and every one of you. And we will start with Administrator Spinrad, who is here to tell you what his experience has been.
Thank you so much, Senator, for your leadership and for bringing this group together. I am Rick Spinrad. I was the administrator for the last 4 years. Probably more importantly, though, for the 15 years prior to that, I was a career scientist with the agency in a variety of jobs. I've been around and in government for actually 9 presidential transitions. And I can tell you, every one involved a redirection in mission priorities or ideologies. But this administration, however, has chosen to basically enter the room, turn out the lights, and start shooting for no reason beyond the theater that it will produce. The administration, I would say, is out to lunch and has no plans for protecting American lives or property, nor working to stimulate righteous economic development. Regarding NOAA, political leadership in this administration doesn't know the agency's mission, and they don't care. To date, with no justification, direction, nor any guidance of any kind, more than 1,000 NOAA employees have been summarily fired. And as you heard from the senator, some were actually fired for excellence or coerced to resign. Yesterday, once again, without any guidance or direction, or even the veneer of a rationale, NOAA was forced to identify an additional 1,029 positions for what is called a reduction in force. Has anyone done an analysis of the benefits to be gained for moving these talented and dedicated government employees? No. Can anyone say what damage will be done by these actions? Yes. I, for one, you can expect things like the following: degraded or eliminated forecasts for everything from extreme weather watches and warnings to seasonal outlooks of drought and flood to tsunami warnings and space weather induced power outages and GPS failures. What about commercial fishing closures or delays and shutting operations at some of the critical salmon hatcheries, especially in the Pacific Northwest, impacting a $320 billion annual industry which employs over 2 million people? We're also going to see delayed or canceled delivery of products and goods into and out of our ports due to compromised abilities to map the harbors and sea lanes for safe navigation. American lives will be threatened, property damage, and economic losses incurred in virtually every business sector, every geographic region of the country, and every component of American society. We can and must speak up about the critical role NOAA plays for our nation, a role that is fundamental and foundational for our economic security, health security, energy security, food security, environmental security, and national and homeland security. The firings, facilities closures, and program terminations currently ongoing by this administration are misguided, ill-informed, often illegal, and just plain inane. In short, this is all cost, no benefit. These actions are not the strategic moves of a government looking out for its populace. They are the unnecessary and malicious acts of a shambolic administration. With that, I want to turn it to one of my former colleagues, Rebecca Howard.
Thanks so much for the introduction. On February 27th, I was fired from my position as a research fish biologist at the Alaska Fisheries Science Center in Seattle. I began this position back in April of 2024 as I was finishing up my PhD in ocean, earth, and atmospheric science at Oregon State University. This was my dream job. I had been working with NOAA Fisheries for almost a decade prior, first as a fisheries observer in the Bering Sea, then as an AmeriCorps volunteer helping with endangered salmon populations, and most recently through a number of research collaborations during my master's and PhD. Most of my graduate work and education was actually funded by federal research grants. I've been working toward a career in marine science since I was a child, and the indiscriminate firing of federal employees not only affects my career, it also jeopardizes the work that NOAA Fisheries does. At the Alaska Fisheries Science Center, I was part of the groundfish bottom trawl survey team, and this meant that I was involved in the work needed to assess Alaska's populations of shellfish and groundfish, which are fish that live near the seafloor like pollock, cod, and flatfish. These fish make up not only some of the largest and most valuable fisheries in the country, but also the world. The team I was part of was in the midst of preparing for the 2 bottom trawl surveys that are expected to happen this summer, as they have for the last 4 decades. We were busy staffing the surveys, preparing scientific equipment and software, setting up staff and volunteer trainings, and making sure we have necessary supplies. This requires an immense amount of time and effort, and is done by a team that was very understaffed and stretched thin even before I was fired. Several NOAA employees who were supposed to participate in the survey were fired, including myself, making it even more challenging to find the necessary staff. I was trained to fill the role of survey coordinator for one of the trawl surveys, a position that is now empty, and was in the middle of preparing statistical models to provide data products to our stock assessment team. I was also continuing my research on where snow crab and groundfish populations may shift in response to changing oceans. If more employees from the bottom trawl teams retire or are fired in the upcoming reductions in force, the surveys will be extremely difficult to pull off, if not impossible. And we have recent examples of how important these kinds of data are. In 2020, the Bering Sea bottom trawl survey did not happen due to the COVID-19 pandemic. This led to a year of missing data and, critically, missing information on the snow crab population. As many of you know, the snow crab fishery collapsed in 2021, and consequently, we don't have a good idea of what their population looked like the year prior in 2020. We need these types of data to know how many fish and crabs we can catch each year, where those populations are going as the oceans change, and to keep track of environmental trends. Firing people like me will make it incredibly hard for NOAA Fisheries to fulfill its mission, keep our fisheries sustainable, and provide the best available ocean science. And I'd like to turn it over to Dennis. Yeah.
Thank you, Rebecca. Yes, my name is Dennis Jaska. I'm a former NOAA investigative support technician for the Office of Law Enforcement. I was an observer as well, too. For nearly 26 years ago, I began working with NOAA as a fisheries observer. Fisheries observers are not federal workers. They are contracted marine biologists who collect data on board commercial fishing vessels. As a support technician, I supported not only observers, but enforcement officers as well, and observer program support staff. So approximately 350 observers deploy in Alaska each year. The data collected by observers is critical for the sustainable management of Alaska fish populations harvested by commercial fishing vessels based in the Seattle area. Additionally, observers document any potential fisheries violations they may witness. All of this information further ensures that stakeholders can market their sustainable seafood products domestically and internationally. In 2018, I began my work as a contractor for the National Marine Fisheries Service Office of Law Enforcement Alaska Division. In July of 2024, this contractor position was converted to a federal position. Exactly 2 weeks ago, on February 27th, I received an email from an individual I never met that said I was terminated because, and I quote, "my ability, knowledge, and/or skills do not fit the agent's current needs." I received the email at 12:50 p.m. Pacific time, and it said that the termination was effective at 5 p.m. Eastern or 2 p.m. Pacific. The work I did was essential to the Office of Law Enforcement's efforts to ensure the safety of fisheries observers. While the Alaska Division is spread throughout coastal Alaska, the observer operations staff is mostly located in Seattle. Therefore, one of my main roles was to be the main point of contact for enforcement officers. Having an enforcement representative in Seattle is essential to connect people and ensure fisheries observers are familiar with the enforcement arm of NIMS. Each year, I gathered and reviewed hundreds of documents generated by observers that were pertinent for OLE investigations. I then scanned and transmitted these documents to our field officers. Using my knowledge of fisheries regulations, I vetted observer reports of potential violation and prioritized important complaints for the agents and officers at Office of Law Enforcement, or OLE. I also trained observers on regulatory matters and trained them on strategies to proactively address potential violations. And most importantly, I trained them on how to report issues such as interference and harassment. The rapport between Alaska Division, the North Pacific observers, and the observer support staff is lauded every year as being the gold standard of partnerships between an enforcement division and a scientific division. It was an honor to play such a role in this partnership, but practically speaking, having someone in that position who is familiar with both observer and enforcement operations is the most efficient way to do things. Without a person to represent and connect law enforcement to the observers in Seattle, NIMS loses an opportunity to continue building rapport with observers. Support staff would have no contact with an individual who can answer compliance-related questions. Additionally, the task of reviewing, vetting, and sending documents falls on others who already have a high workload. The whole point of my job was to do the proactive work of streamlining information flows and educating people. And I'm also concerned that further cuts will hamper NOAA's ability to ensure that our nation's marine resources will remain healthy and abundant. Thank you, Senator Murney, for this opportunity to tell my story, and then I will pass it to Mark.
Thank you, Senator Murray, for the opportunity to join today. My name is Mark Baltzell. I live in Olympia, Washington, and I'm a single dad supporting a teenage daughter and 2 dogs. My story is like many of my colleagues. Working for NOAA was a dream job. I spent the better part of my working life in public service supporting sustainable salmon fisheries in Washington. Prior to joining NOAA, I had a more than 20-year career at the Washington State Department of Fish and Wildlife, working in salmon monitoring, management, and policy. I started at NOAA Fisheries as a fishery management specialist in June of 2024. When I joined NOAA, I was hired into the Sustainable Fisheries Division in the Anadromous Harvest Management Branch. Our branch is small but mighty. Our work is responsible for regulatory oversight of salmon and steelhead fisheries occurring in the EEZ off the West Coast, the Columbia River, and Puget Sound. An additional significant portion of our work involves implementing the relevant chapters of the Pacific Salmon Treaty. Currently, there are 28 populations of salmon and steelhead on the West Coast that are listed as threatened or endangered, and there are several others that have been petitioned for listing. My specific work was in the Columbia River, supporting the US v. Oregon Management Agreement. I served on the Technical Advisory Committee on the NIMS technical teams supporting mediation of the US v. Oregon parties negotiating a new 10-year agreement. I was to be a significant contributor to the regulatory package that would come out of a new agreement. In January, I was appointed as the federal representative to the Fraser River panel, which implements Chapter 4 of the Pacific Salmon Treaty, overseeing sockeye and pink fisheries. Having had previous experience on the panel, I was going to be a key member of the US delegation supporting renegotiation efforts in an upcoming Pacific Salmon Treaty renegotiation. The work that my branch conducts enables hundreds of millions of dollars in economic activity around salmon fisheries coastwide. On February 27th, I received a termination email from Vice Admiral Hahn stating that I was not fit for continued employment because my knowledge, skills, and abilities did not fit the agency needs. I had 68 minutes to pack my office and walk away. The email was the same email that was sent to hundreds of my fellow employees. Although I believe my removal was illegal, I'm not here to try to get my position back. I'm here because I care. I care about the people and communities that are impacted by reduced or closed fisheries that my work supported. I care about the devastating impacts of a diminished NOAA that may have on Washingtonians and Americans across our country. I care about the tens of millions of dollars in federal money that is funneled through NOAA for salmon recovery, habitat restoration, monitoring hatchery improvements, and supporting tribal fisheries. All is in danger of going away. I care because I was in an agency loaded with people who care and were devoted because they believed in the science and the mission. Care because I'm a dad, I'm a grandpa, and a fisherman. And I want to ensure that these resources are perpetuated for the generations following me. Gutting NOAA and the federal government puts all the things that I care about at risk. Thank you for the opportunity to be here.
Thank you. I so appreciate each one of you speaking out because I know you are dealing with personal issues after being let go like this and speaking out today. You all talked about what was going to impact Washington State and the United States and our fisheries and everything we care about, because that is your work and what you passionately care about. I appreciate it so much and just wanted to say thank you again for your service and for speaking out today. So Naomi, I will turn it over to you for any questions that the press would like to ask.
Wonderful. If you're a member of the press and you would like to ask a question, if you could use the raise hand function to raise your hand on Zoom, and we have time to take some questions. I'll give folks a minute to use the raise hand function. Great, we'll go to Evan, and if you could just say your name and outline.
Hi, this is Evan Bush for NBC News. Rick, you mentioned some additional layoffs to come. Could you tell us a little bit more about what your expectation is there, how you have that information, and then what kind of process the agency is planning to go through?
The additional cuts I was referring to, Evan, and thank you for that question, were the reductions in force, which were mandated from on high in the department. 1,029 positions were identified for NOAA. To the best of my knowledge, that number comes from merely working out the equation of making cuts across the department and then apportioning those to each bureau within the department. NOAA, of course, is the largest bureau in the Department of Commerce. My understanding, and your question about where I'm getting this information, I've been talking with a number of my colleagues throughout the agency, and there was no guidance provided with respect to how those cuts should be made. My assumption is that you can't make a cut of that size without taking some vertical cuts. That is to say, you can't simply say take 10% across the board. So I expect the way this will play out, and it will take a few weeks to play out, is that there will be functions that are eliminated in the agency as a result. And those RIFs, assuming they are done legally and according to process, would materialize, again, I would say over a period of a few weeks.
And next we'll go to Eric with Oregon Public Broadcasting.
Hi, thanks. I was just wondering if any of the folks who talked could talk about what these cuts will mean for communities that depend on fisheries.
I can take a stab if that's all right. Specifically for fisheries, it's really hard to say how quickly those impacts may show themselves. I can tell you that staffing cuts and changes at headquarters have resulted in, most recently, the Pacific Fishery Management Council only had the regional administrator and an assistant regional administrator there. Usually there would be a team of biologists and fishery modelers and other staff there to support the council's work, and that didn't happen just last week. I think there's a question about the regulatory environment and how quickly these fisheries can get approved from Washington, and that puts those fisheries at risk. I think this happens all up and down the coast, where these smaller coastal communities really depend on these regular fishing seasons and opportunities, both for seafood industry, but also supporting tourism and the local economies. So that's a basic answer, but.
Next, we'll go to Josh with Apple Valley News.
Hey, so I have kind of a two-part question here. The first question is, so our market in southeastern Washington and northeastern Oregon, it is covered by the National Weather Service in Pendleton. And I called them to get just like an exact number on how many layoffs they had. And of course, they were pretty tight-lipped about it. So I was hoping someone maybe knows the quantity of the layoffs at perhaps that station in particular. And then the second part of the question is, I've been talking with some people from the Washington Department of Natural Resources, in particular the Wildfire Division, and they sound pretty concerned about the upcoming fire season. So what do these cuts mean in regards to the looming fire season?
I'll answer the first one. We don't know the answer to that because we're not being given the information by the administration. What we have seen so far is employees like this just get their notice 2 hours before they're told their phone's going to be shut off, and that's when we find out. So I don't have the answers to that. I don't know if anybody else does.
Yeah, Senator, I can amplify a little bit and say that I know between the deferred retirement and the what are called the probationary terminations, there were well over 200, probably closer to 250 people removed from the Weather Service. Now, the Weather Service has 122 weather forecast offices around the country. They were not hit evenly, but even on average, that means a couple of people in each weather forecast would be the average. I don't know the case for Pendleton myself either, but please bear in mind that those weather forecast offices, almost every one of them was already operating at barely acceptable, in some cases below acceptable levels. We worked hard. In fact, we hired 2,000 people at NOAA last year. We hired 2,000, and we have added to that by having contractors in each office too. So any cuts, even if it's just one or two at any given WFO weather forecast office, are going to have an impact.
Great. And next we'll go to Simone Carter with the Elon.
Hi, thank you so much for taking my question. I have a question for Mark. I know that you mentioned you had gotten a termination email that was the same as hundreds of fellow employees, and you had 68 minutes to pack up and leave. Could you kind of walk me through what was going through your head in that moment and yeah, how it has affected you emotionally, please?
Well, I was prepared for it. I'm one of those people who pays attention and had basically seen the writing on the wall for a 3 to 4 week period prior to getting the letter. So even though it was expected, it was sad, and it made me sad and angry to get to a place where like I said, it was a dream job, and then to have that kind of taken away for no reason, not performance reason, other than a decision that was made by an unelected bureaucrat in DC. Emotionally, I'm lucky. I have a great support system and a lot of group of friends and a lot of people in the salmon industry that are supportive. I've already had several job offers, so I feel pretty supported, but I know a lot of my colleagues aren't. I think internally we've kind of organically found some ways to support each other across the country that I'm really excited about having that community, but it's a tough pill to swallow when none of the reasons for your termination were legal or right.
Thanks. And next we'll go to Kelly with the.
Hi, thanks for doing this. I was wondering if someone could speak to how this is specifically affecting the farming community and agriculture in terms of crop insurance payouts, and we're getting toward tornado season, and farmers obviously depend very much on timely storm data. So if someone could sort of give a couple of examples of how this affects agriculture, that would be great. Thank you.
Rick, do you have some responses for that?
Yeah, Senator, I'd be glad to. So
Thank
there's
you.
a couple different perspectives on that. One is one of the most important sets of products for the agriculture industry is the seasonal outlooks. So especially now in early March when they're doing their planning for their growing season, the farmers want to know, am I going to see a warmer than usual, colder than usual, wetter, drier than usual kind of planting and growing season? The Climate Prediction Center is the body within the National Weather Service that provides that. My guess is they've already taken some hits and will obviously take more. And consequently, I think the expectation from farmers that they would get the same quality and lead time on these products is unrealistic. They will not get those products with the same quality and lead time. The same on a much shorter time scale obviously applies not just to areas like the Southeast for tornadoes, but in the East Coast and the Gulf Coast, the hurricane season is looming as well. And I will tell you that all of these predictive capabilities, I believe, are going to be compromised. I used to live in Oregon before I took this job in Central Oregon, and I can tell you, if I were living back there again, and I'd say everybody in the Northwest, fire season is upon us very shortly too. And one of the things that isn't called out is one of the most important functions that the National Weather Service provides is called incident meteorologists, or IMETs, as we call them. It's about a little over 100 meteorologists who are doing their forecasting job throughout the country. But when these fires hit, they surge and deploy to the fires. So if you got a fire in the Cascades in Washington State, there will be incident meteorologists reporting to help provide on-scene support. I know for a fact that some of those IMETs will not be on the job as well. So that capability is going to be compromised too. So all of those functions are going to be compromised.
I'm just going to emphasize that. I've been to numerous fire sites over the years when we have wildfires. And when you go to the headquarters where the fire is being directing where firefighters are to go, there is a NOAA weather person on site. And their number one function is to let the firefighters know where the winds are coming from, what the conditions are, to keep them safe and to predict where that fire is going to go. I can't imagine going through this season without that accurate information for the safety and protection of our firefighters and the communities that they're responding in.
All right, we have time for a couple more questions. So again, if folks have a question, please use the raise hand function, and we will go back to Evan.
Thanks so much again. For the folks who were laid off, a federal judge in California today ordered different departments, the Veterans Affairs, Defense, Energy, and several other departments to reinstate probationary workers who were fired. And I'm just wondering if something like that were to happen for NOAA, would you consider returning to the agency after what you've gone through?
I can answer that question for myself at least. So I would love to have my job back. I think it is going to be difficult to go back into that uncertainty prior to receiving my termination notice. Like was mentioned earlier, I was kind of just waiting for that email to come. And so being put back in that stressful situation is not something I would look forward to, but this is what I wanted to do with my career. And so I would take it back.
Same.
Yeah, I like Rebecca, I would have some hesitancy, but as I stated, this is a dream job and I would welcome it. I think what would give me pause is whether or not the impending RIF is going to go forward. Obviously, as a probationary employee, I likely wouldn't survive a full-on RIF process. So I think that would factor into my decision making.
All right, and not seeing any other hands raised, I'll just give folks one more opportunity to go ahead and unmute themselves if they have a question they would like to ask if we're able to figure out the raise hand function.
This is Evan again. Senator Murray, I was wondering if you could describe a little bit about what actions you're taking with colleagues on the Hill to address the obvious loss here that we've seen?
Evan, that's such an important question. And one of the reasons I'm doing this today is because we have seen from the beginning of this administration when people speak up, speak out, and adamantly demand a service back, that it does get reinstated. And I think just a lot of people in my world and across the country don't even know, first of all, what NOAA does and how important it is, as you've heard today, or that these people's jobs have been eliminated. They won't know until perhaps they don't get their fishery count and they don't have the ability to know how much fish or crab they can get. They may not know till a fire occurs and there's nobody there at the site. They may not know until they're looking at their weather report and it's just not quite as accurate as it used to be. So what I'm trying to do right now is raise the specter, have people understand it, and to raise their voices and to let their members of Congress know we need this information back. It's critical to us, our safety, our security, and our way of life.
All right, and we just have time for one more question. We'll go to Saki, if you can just say your name and outlet.
Hi, this is Sachi, and I'm a reporter for Grist. Thank you all for being here today. It's been recently reported that DOGE also announced the potential termination of 19 NOAA offices. Rick, would you mind commenting on how the closures of these facilities would impact operations and the employees that use them?
Yeah, I can answer that in general because the specific answer depends on which offices. NOAA has, or had when I was administrator, 620 facilities around the country. And so every one of those has to justify either its purchase or its lease. And when I was administrator, we actually delivered to Congress a strategic plan for facilities, maintenance operations, and priority of retention. What I have seen in passing is lists that have no justification other than are the leases up in the next 6 months? And so I would argue that the specific answer to your question actually depends a lot on which facility it is that's being shut. But I can also tell you none of those facilities is being operated frivolously, and they are critical to the continuity of the mission right now.
And I will just add one thing. If it's done the way I expect it will, which is this lease is up, I can close it, DOGE, Elon Musk, Donald Trump will have no idea what they are eliminating either.
All right. I want to thank everyone for their time today and for having on this press call. This was recorded. We will distribute the recording widely.
Thank you all so much again for helping us understand what is happening to NOAA and to the critical services that you all provide. And my very best to each one of you. Thank you.